using square roots. When we solve using square roots, we need to make sure the square is isolated. We're using square roots to solve. That means square roots are not in the problem. Squares are in the problem. So we're going to get the square isolated, which means we're going to get the square by itself. Then, to get rid of a square, we square root. And that's where we square root both sides. Because you do one side, you got to do it to the other. Anytime we solve using a square root, and solving means there's an equal sign, solving with a square root means square rooting both sides, you will always get two answers. Highlight this, star this, mark it down, because it is the number one thing we forget when solving, and that's what we're doing because there's an equal sign. What we did the day before, no equal sign, there wasn't two answers. Today, equal sign, two answers, a positive and a negative. All right, let's look at some examples. X squared is 8. In this example, x squared is isolated, it is alone, it is by itself. So we can go straight to the solving process of square rooting both sides. When I square root both sides, what happens with a square root and a square is that they cancel each other out. A square and a square root cancel each other out, leaving just the letter that was there. Then we need to simplify what's ever on this other side. And hopefully for last day when we've been simplifying, we know that 8 is 2 root 2. But the very key important thing of this is not only is it 2 root 2, but it is plus minus 2 root 2. Whenever I solve using the square roots, I'm always going to get two answers. I'm going to get a positive answer, and I'm going to get a negative answer. And you can just use that double sign plus minus. You do not have to write it twice as 2 root 2 and negative 2 root 2. Although you're welcome to, you don't have to. Plus minus is the preferred and most common format. Okay, let's look at x squared minus 16 is 0. In order to get the square alone, I have to add the 16 to the other side. So there's my x squared is 16. And now I square root both sides. When I square root both sides, the square part is going to go away. I get two answers, plus minus. And we should know the square root of 16 is 4. So x equals plus and minus 4. All right, let's add to that a little bit. 1/2, and then the quantity x squared plus 2 equals 4. You have to isolate the square. That means I've got to get the square, that x squared by itself. I've got to get rid of the 1/2, and I've got to get rid of the 2. With our solving methods that we've been working on for many years now, but specifically back in chapter 1, I would multiply both sides by a 2 so that the 1/2 part canceled. Then subtract the 2. So I get 1/2 is 6. When I square root both sides on this one, when I square root the square, that goes away. I always get two answers and square root of 6. If I cannot simplify, which in this case I can't, because 6 is a 2 and a 3, there are no pairs, they're all singles, they all stay inside, then that's how I leave my answer. So you might come out to something that can be simplified to partials. You might simplify to a whole number, or you might not be able to simplify at all. But either way, make sure you're always coming out to two answers, a plus and a minus. Okay, let's try a couple more that have us doing a few more steps to our solving. Go ahead, try this example. Try it on your own here for a minute. That means pause the video, work it out, and then I'm going to go through the steps and see if you get the same thing. So pause for right now. First thing you should have done is you should have subtracted the 5 for negative 4. Then you should have divided by the 3, so 2x squared minus 1 is negative 4/3. When you add over the 1, you get 2x squared. If I add 1, that's the same as adding 3 over 3, so that's, oops, I'm sorry, we need to go back. I wrote the problem down. That should be an 11, not a 1, because it's coming out to be a negative, and that should have been a big problem for you when you paused the video and tried to work it out. You're probably like, what's going on? So we need to change that a little bit. So that's going to actually be a 6. Now when I add my 1, that comes out to a nice number. Oh, how about 6/7? Or 6 divided by the 3, so we get 2. Now add the 1, we're going to get 3. Divide by it, and we get our 3/2. It does help if I give you the correct problem. I apologize for that. Subtract the 5, that's where the 6 came from. Divide by the 3, that's where the 2 came from. Divide by the other 2, and that's where our 3/2 are. Now we are at square rooting both sides. Square root both sides. We're going to get x is plus minus, and we're going to get 3 over 2. Now when it's a fraction, remember that's the same as saying they're each their own radical, and we can't have radicals in the denominator, so we need to get rid of that radical 2. We're going to get rid of the radical 2 by multiplying top and bottom by it. So radical 3, radical 2 is radical 6. 2 and 2 gives you 2. And then make sure we got a plus and a minus. (3x squared plus 2 is 62). Go ahead, pause the video. I promise these are the right numbers this time. And try it again. All right, when you come back, we're going to subtract 2 from both sides, so we get 3x squared is 60. We're going to divide by the 3 and get 20. When I square root, I get plus minus the square root of 20. And hopefully we know 20 can be simplified to our 4 and 5, which gives us a pair of 2's. So plus minus 2 square root of 5. All right, we're going to have one last one. 1/2 x plus 3 squared equals 5. Now notice this square is on the outside, so when I isolate the square, I'm really only getting rid of the 1/2. So pause the video, try it on your own, and come back, and I will walk us through the steps. First step that we want to do is get rid of that 1/2. That means we are going to multiply both sides by the 2, so that we get x plus 3 quantity squared is 10. Now when I square root, I am still square rooting both sides. I am square rooting, and when I square root a square, it leaves the x plus the 3. It doesn't matter that there's more than one thing there. That all of that was squared. So only the square and the square root go away. I get two answers. I get a plus minus and a 10. The 10 does not reduce. But in order to get the x by itself, I have to move the 3. When I subtract a 3, it goes in front of the plus minus sign. Because it's the minus 3 and then plus minus the root 10. Those are our two solutions that we're going to have. So those are some easier ones all the way down to a little bit more complicated ones. Go back through them, try them, and then we will work on some more in class.